Well, Dr. Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, joins us in the studio for more discussions on these issues. That's issues that have to do with ambassadorial nominees. Let me just, by the way, good to have you. I always want to run ahead of time. So, first of all, I welcome you to the program. Now, let's start this way. What's your thinking, your evaluation of the names you've seen on that list before we branch into other areas?
Okay, first, it's important to recognize that ambassadorial lists and ambassadorial postings in almost everywhere in the world, including developed countries, reflect often political priorities and a form of the typical political job. So what that means is that apart from career diplomats, everybody on that list somewhat passes a political test. So this is usually what the president uses to reward political associates globally. The difference is that many countries that have serious foreign policy commitments try to put in round pegs in round holes. So whereas you have the political dimension of president's men, so to say, and maybe people who work in think tanks that support the strategic vision of the administration, they get, put into diplomatic positions. So generally, you expect it to be political. So nothing terrible about that. But again, it reflects three dimensions of politics. First is the nature of the political dynamics in that country. Two, the character and disposition of the president and administration. So oftentimes you see corrupt administrations cover deals and reward campaign financiers. And sometimes persons involved in some dark businesses with presidencies, with ministerial ambassadorial postings. So if we look at any list of ambassadors, you could sense and conclude on the moral character of that government, because usually it's not a job that matches specific qualifications. So it's not like the head of engineering or the head of statistics. So it's a job that allows for a latitude of qualifications and competencies, quote unquote. And so the president uses it to express first who he is, his political ethics and values. And so it makes, in some cases, see some people, quote unquote, corrupt, criminal, tainted persons. And people say, a ministerial list Trump makes up and the one that maybe Biden makes up or the one that Clinton makes up will reflect different moral complexity. So this is a list that tells us about how the president views governance. And so you could see Obasanjo's list, for example, with a real pretension to technocracy. And so Obasanjo had a team, not ministers, cabinet people, who reflected that preference towards technocracy. So you had a ministerial list that reflected professors, Hagler, professor of political science. But there are people who are close to him, people who are friendly, but there are people who are also of a certain pedigree. Again, you look at Jonathan, he may not be as technocratic as Obasanjo, I may not pretend to be, but again, reflecting a broad commitment to some kind of merit. So those become guardrails and constraints to presidential appointment. But it looks like the president, especially not as governor, some modicum of technocracy, you can see that some of the people we put, but as president, President Tinubu is unabashedly and openly political. He just look at political value, payback, and political use. And so everyone in that team are persons who probably directly helped him through all kinds of work, political legwork, contact. For example, the Wike boys, if you like to call them boys, okay? They featured as expected or as promised. So he pays back his IOUs. I say, I'm a faithful guy. If you work for me, you get a reward. Now, take for example.
I love loyalty.
Yeah, exactly. And if you work, you get. So this also is also a game to incentivize future players to say, you know what? If you play, you get. Now he rewards Mahmoud for delivering on his own commitments.
What do you mean by delivering?
Oh, delivering. I mean, Mahmoud, my own book, rigged the election, 2023 election. I said it before. I said I even went to court, Federal High Court. So I think INEC, which is Mahmoud, rigged the election. And so they get their pay time comes in. That's my view, because there was no reason for that IRF not to work. There was no reason for elections to be transmitted. And we saw...
And then the question of when it was announced.
And then we saw what was cancelled here and there, and then...
What impact?
So in a sense, this says to other guy who may be on the job, the new guy in the job, look, see what this guy got. By the way, ADC says, or PDP says...
I was coming to that.
Yeah, there was nowhere in the world where the president will openly give... Ambassadorial posting is a reward. It's not like election. It's not like merit-based process. You apply, get a job, okay? This is political job.
But even if it's a reward, ambassadors represent the country.
Yep.
Shouldn't you care about the quality, character, integrity in terms of governance? You're not representing yourself. You're representing the country where you come from. So what impact in terms of governance, in terms of the eyes, the world, the see us, how they see us, do you think that this caliber, I'm sure it's not all of them, but this president wants you've seen, what impact do you think that?
Okay, so let's start from the idea that the ambassadors represent the country. That's correct. Now, under constitutional law, we talk about what we call the sole organ theory. The president of a country is the sole organ that represents the country internationally. So when the president is commander-in-chief, he's also the sole organ, meaning that the person who represents Nigeria abroad is Mr. Tinubu. So he sends an aide. So these guys represent us, but actually they represent the president who represents the nation. That's the theory, constitutional law. So what they need therefore is that ideally, you're right, you're going to say, do these people have the pedigree to represent Nigeria? And so you made that choice. But in reality, like I told you, staffing of a president's staffing, decision on appointment, is the first indicator of his moral character and his political project. So the president sees appointment from the lens of politics. So for him, these guys, and by the way, we think that ambassadors matter. In Nigeria, I don't think they matter. Nigeria has almost very low foreign policy objective and commitment. I mean, if you send anybody to Washington, how is it going to change the game? If the person is not connected to the major think tanks in Washington, if the person has no access, we saw what happened with the Christian genocide saga. That Nigeria didn't have any footing apart from paid influencers, you know? So people assume that ambassadors really matter. And again, it might be counterintelligence. These ambassadors are actually going to waste Nigerians' money. Nigeria, in the last 10 years, has no serious foreign policy commitment anywhere.
So then are you saying that the president was right in not appointing ambassadors over the period of 2 years?
Ironically, he was right because, okay, let me ask a question now.
Some would agree with that because the talk is that what the CPC thing. Because of if we had ambassadors, that would have.
That's a joke. Who's ambassador? For long, we don't have high profile. But even the career diplomats you're talking about. I was an advisor in foreign policy, foreign affairs minister under Yar'Adua. So I can tell you, what many of these ambassadors do is to organize meaningless events for the first ladies to come. Send signal back home to $100,000 to host the president. So you're going to see a racket. By the way, what would these politicians, just ask yourself, okay, let's take Ibazu, let's take FFK, let's take Reno Mukri. If you send him to a country, how does his ambassadorship change the dialectics? What matters most is the foreign policy guy, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the technocrats in the headquarters office. Do they have real foreign policy capability and ideas? If they do, in many cases, the officers in Chancery, the Consul General, and the staffers at the embassies can deliver. These guys are going to have endless parties, drinking, having meetings that are meaningless. So the question I ask first, let's start for the basics. What's Nigeria doing in foreign policy? Nigeria is in a state of tatters. Economically, domestic policy, how would Nigeria really profit from an international conversation at the United Nations, in the US, engaging? Because Nigeria is weak. And over the years, it's become weaker. So the foreign policy pretension that the ambassador is going to unlock something significant is people who don't know the game.
Let's move the direction to another angle. Because
so the implication of this is that even if on this team, the president chooses some people to critical places, first, our advisor is make sure that only career officers go to multilateral centers like Geneva, like Ethiopia, like the New York, places where you have UN institutions, where real work happen. Again, if you put the foreign policy guys who have that or one or two people who have the capacity in that list, for example, to go there, that's fine. The rest, I mean, it's just like I said, is just game.
I wonder where that leaves. I wonder where that leaves us. Okay, let's take the issue of just give me a moment. Let's take the issue of what ADC is saying. ADC says from the list they have seen, they say it's insensitive and could send a wrong signal. How insensitive, if it is insensitive, if you agree it's insensitive, is it? I mean,
ADC is right. Look, people are alleging. Let's assume it's false that Mahmoud rigged the election for you.
Let me even add that Mahmoud.
Yes, let me
just add that because they also said that the nomination of Yakubu would undermine the neutrality of the country's electoral system. And I'm wondering, he's no more the INEC chairman.
But it sends signal to the guy now that if you play ball, you get rewarded. I mean, this is crazy, to be frank with you. You shouldn't ever think about giving Mahmoud this job. Even if you had a deal, which I think, even if he basically...
That's your opinion.
Rigged, I think, even if he basically rigged the election for you, you just have to pretend. Look, and that tells you something about this presidency. This is a really, really effective political machine at work. They don't care about people's view. They don't care about symbolisms. They don't care about optics. They don't care about morality. So this is just real hard politics. It got job done. People are already screaming, "Oh, Mahmoud is bad. Mahmoud is doing election."
I asked you before, where does that leave governance?
It shows.
Where does that leave the electorate?
No,
where does that leave?
Let me tell you what it does. It tells a clear and consistent story. Mr. President is very clear and clarity. He tells you that his concern is not what they think. It's not about moral perception. It's about politics and political capital. Look, it's an efficient work he did.
No, but I think it was Socrates that said politics is an instrument that you use for the better good of the people.
Socrates was also very famous for, being scornful of pretensions about, the public good is not something that, okay, you assume that politicians work for public good. They don't, actually. That's a problem. And that's why in subsequent democracies, the people themselves create incentive for politicians to work for them. So politicians by nature, and Tinubu is a very, typical and excellent politician in that negative sense, work for themselves. And so what this appointment tells everybody is that the president delayed for 2 years and came out with the same predicted list. People have been talking about FFK, Reno Mokiri, and the pushback didn't make him fail in delivering on deals. He got it done. And so he incentivizes the guy on the street who's working for him that, you know what? It doesn't matter how bad you are. It doesn't matter your criminal record. It doesn't matter if people don't want you. If I promise you, I deliver. That's efficient. But that's dangerous.
That's efficient in a negative.
Efficient in the cynical political machine. This is a cynical political machine. You get my point? This president, we assume that presidents work for us. We assume that leaders care about us. But actually, switch it. Think about them just being careerists. They want to be in power. He wants to win election. He wants to win because it has economic benefit for him.
Democracy should be the government of the people, for the people, by the people. The people must have a way to rein in their leaders.
Democracy,
if they're not working for
democracy presumes, first, that the people have the rationality to make decisions. 2, the people care to fight back. 3, the people have the resources and the capacity to organize and fight back. So what I'm saying is, if the president, by the way, this is discretion. Appointment of ambassador is discretion. He used discretion to act in a way that is discordant with moral expectation of that office. But that is concordant with a cynical view of politics, which is about winning. And what he has done is that he has, look at this guy, they're happy. Look at Reno, you said, saying, thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, he said he has shown him.
The danger is that this is a guy, if you Google now, you see where he says, Tinubu is a drug peddler, okay? He said so. Now, if he's going to post it to a country.
The same thing that Vance did concerning Trump.
Exactly. If he goes to that country now, people will be saying, well, how credible is this guy? Again, no pretense. These guys, they're not going to work for Nigeria. They're going there to have a ball. They're going there to be holding meetings, drinking and posing. I mean, how would wearing a shoke, contribute to Nigeria? So Nigeria,
well, this is
Nigeria.
The picture you're painting is a very dangerous.
But that's the true
precedent.
picture. The true picture is that Nigeria has diminished significantly. Nigeria has no serious. Anybody who is a foreign policy expert to convince me that Nigeria has a serious foreign policy commitment. We've not shown that seriousness, and this list illustrates that this president doesn't even have any pretension to any serious foreign policy commitment.
You're not the first one saying it. I've had a Professor Abu here who said that let's even step back a bit. Do we even have charity?
I'm saying, as somebody who has worked as my advisor and as an expert, we don't have any serious foreign policy commitment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saba Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, for joining us on Newsnight.
Thank you.
Thank you.